All right, we're gonna start it off just a little bit early here. So once again, I think you've been asked a few times, please make sure your phones are on silent. I'm David, I'll be facilitating this room. I would like to, oh God, I don't even have my thing in. First off, I would like to introduce Finn. I'm not gonna try to pronounce the last name, from Animas High School. He's gonna be presenting about what to do about fires.
Is it just going to stay off? Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Finn Bruner. I go to Animas High School, and I'm here to talk to you about what's wrong with putting out fires. So starting with our pros and cons, certain types of pine require extreme temperatures to reproduce. Fire removes underbrush. Fire may get rid of invasive species. Prescribed burning helps to eliminate more devastating fires. And with our cons, we have a risk of property damage, potential air pollution, a risk of casualty damage, and some soil erosion. So where did our fear of fires start? It started with the Big Burn of 1910. This fire burned roughly 3 million acres across northern Idaho and western Montana. This was really the kickoff of fire suppression and the 10 a.m. policy. The 10 a.m. policy stated that any fire that was reported was to be put out by 10 a.m. the following day. This right here is an image of the Big Burn. So what's wrong with putting out fires? They're a natural part of our ecosystems. Not all fires get out of control. An amount of natural burning helps to stabilize ecosystems. Some ecosystems in the West depend on fires, so ponderosa and lodgepole pine, like I was talking about. Fire suppression leads to buildup of natural fuels, so that would be our underbrush that's all building up and just making a tinderbox. And like that, putting out all fires creates a tinderbox in our forests. What impact does climate change have on wildfires? We get a hotter and drier climate quicker and for longer, and our hot climate lasts longer in the fall. These two images are smoke and fire from the 416 fire a few years back. So what would be some of our potential solutions? Say no to Smokey Bear, light burning, move families out of the WUI, better zoning laws, housing affordability, and prescribed burns. The two main takeaways I want you to get from this is not all fires are bad and the housing market is unstable. Thanks for listening. Any questions?
No questions? Pretty quickly. We can move on towards the next one from this section. We have Jack Purcell. We're gonna try not to mess up more names today. Do you want it in presentation mode?
Yeah, I go to the Microsoft Excel or Outlook. It's already open. And full screen. Thank you. So hello, my name is Jack Purcell. I'm a 7th grader at Mountain Middle. Today I will be speaking about the ecological benefits of wildfires. So many people think that wildfires are bad for the environment. That's not completely true though. Wildfires actually can be good for the ecosystem. Although they seem very dangerous, there are some benefits. So what even is a wildfire? Well, there are 3 types of fires. First, there's a ground fire. A ground fire is just what it sounds like, a fire in the ground. Ground fires burn in the organic matter beneath the twigs, leaves, pine cones, and pine needles, so in the soil. Secondly, there's a surface fire. A surface fire is a fire that burns in the leaves, twigs, pine needles, and pine cones that are on the ground. Lastly, there's a crown fire. A crown fire burns through the canopy of a forest. Crown fires are the most dangerous and the most difficult to contain. A fire needs 4 things to burn, which together are called the fire triangle. First, it needs an ignition source, such as a match, lightning, or lava. After it is ignited, it needs three things to continue burning. First, it needs fuel, such as twigs, leaves, underbrush, and trees. Secondly, it needs heat. And lastly, it needs oxygen. So now let's talk about ecological niches. Now, you may be wondering, what is an ecological niche? And an ecological niche is, at its simplest form, how an organism interacts within its ecosystem. It's not quite that simple, though. It is also its position within an ecosystem and how the organism thrives and develops adaptations that allow it to thrive. An example of thriving using an ecological niche is desert succulents, which adapt to their ecological niches by growing long roots and storing water in their leaves. The word niche actually derives from the French word nicher, which means to nest. So ecological niches are really important to the ecosystem, especially when talking about wildfire. So another topic I want to cover before we dive deeper is biodiversity. Luckily, biodiversity isn't quite as complex of a topic as ecological niches, but is just as important, if not more. So biodiversity is the wide variety of living organisms in a specific area. The food chain is also very intertwined with biodiversity. Part of biodiversity is regulating the amount of each species, which makes sure that there aren't too many of one species. It is basically having homeostasis within an ecosystem. Homeostasis means keeping a stable environment even when external conditions change. Even when a single animal is removed from the entire ecosystem can crumble. An example of this was around the mid-1900s when wolves in Yellowstone National Park were extinct because of hunting. This was detrimental to the ecosystem because the animals that the wolves ate thrived and grew largely in numbers. And because of this, the ecological balance was set off and there's too many of one species. Then the animals that the wolves' prey ate nearly died out because they had an unusually large group of predators. And this process happened for all of the other species in the environment, and the ecological balance was way off just because of the loss of a single species. Eventually, wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone, and the ecosystem was able to balance again. But as you can see from this, just the loss of one species destroyed the entire balance of an ecosystem. Biodiversity is a very crucial part of the ecosystem and the world. So lastly, I'm going to talk about animal habitats. Animal habitats are helpful to the ecosystem because they increase biodiversity by allowing for more animals to come in and enrich the ecosystem. For example, when a tree falls, animals can make their homes inside of that, and that can increase the amount of life and diversity. Sorry about that. That can increase the amount of life and diversity in an ecosystem. Animal habitats are really important to the ecosystem, especially when talking about wildfires. So, wildfires can be good things. Wildfires clear out old growth and underbrush and make room for new growth. A lot of plants struggle with getting resources such as water and sunlight, which are necessary for photosynthesis. When fire clears out the bigger plants, it gives the smaller plants more opportunities to grow. When fire burns over soil, it enriches soil with extra nutrients, which makes it easier for plants to grow. This happens because when fire burns through the underbrush, it clears out all of the old plants, which will immediately release all of their nutrients, such as nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, and carbon. And after this process, the soil is generally more enriched. All of these nutrients make the soil like a fertile flower bed, and plants can easily grow, which increases biodiversity. So fire can also make room for niches, which we talked about earlier, but just as a refresher, a niche is the position of an organism in a community of plants and animals. Niches can stabilize an ecosystem and make it less resistant to natural disasters. This is because the ecosystem has more ways to respond to the disturbance, which makes it easier to fix the problem. Fires can also create niches. An example of a new niche created by fire is if a lot of animals died and the ecosystem wasn't functioning correctly because of a lack of help. New animals could come in and adapt to new niches, which would help the ecosystem. Some species, such as the ponderosa pine and lodgepole pine, also need fire to germinate. This is because their seeds require an intense heat to explode so that the water can slowly drip in and the seeds can begin the germination process. So lastly, fire can clear out pests such as bark beetles and mites. Bark beetles kill the trees and might spread disease, so without them, the ecosystem is generally healthier. Wildfires can be good, but that doesn't mean it's always a good thing. So, There are some negative impacts of fire, such as the loss of ecosystems, the death of both animals and humans, and the loss of property and structures. Wildfires can devastate and completely change ecosystems in really bad ways. So here are my sources. And overall, wildfire can be a really helpful event for the ecosystem. After all, wildfires are natural forces. Thank you so much for coming and watching my presentation. Any questions?
So you said that fires need heat. So where do they get the heat from?
They get heat from the oxygen. They get heat from the oxygen and the fuel that I was talking about that are intertwined with the fire triangle.
So my question is, what got you interested in this presentation and this type of wildfire?
So like whenever we go camping, I always thought that fires were so cool to look at. And just like I thought that they were such neat forces. I don't know. But then like we were learning about invasive species and wildfires last year and how they're bad for the environment. And I sort of wanted to like try to change people's opinions a little bit to show that they're not completely bad forces. Yes, Tenzing.
How long does it take an environment to fully recover from a wildfire?
I am not 100% sure, but I'd say probably a while, like over 50 years, depending on how big the wildfire is. Yes.
You said there are like 3 types of fire. Can there be like combinations of that too?
Yeah. So like if you could have a ground fire with a crown fire, and that's, yeah, you can have different combinations of fires.
Did you see any data on how effective the strike burns has been in the last 2 decades?
Yes. So, well, not necessarily on how, like, not statistics on how impactful and helpful they've been, but I saw a bunch of different information that was saying how good prescribed burns are, because like fires are natural forces, and when they're meant to burn to clear out the old growth to make room for new growth. But when they don't burn because humans try to stop them, that makes it, there's so much built up fuel. So then when there finally is a natural wildfire, no one can stop it. So yes, prescribed burns are really helpful to the ecosystem.
What would normally be like the source of the cause of fire starting? Like,
well, so like usually it could be like a campfire, a match, or lightning. Yep.
So we did move pretty quickly. I think that's all we have for the presenters today.
I had a question. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Great. My question is, can you talk a little bit, please, about like this area, like the Durango area, and wildfire, both like risk and importance in this local ecosystem?
Yeah, so I didn't do a ton of really research on fires locally in Durango, but yeah, I don't really have a ton of information on that. So sorry about that.
I have one more thing.
Yeah.
You had said there's 3 different types. You might have explained it in your presentation. I said here. What are the 3 different types and how are they different?
Yeah, so this is kind of a complex topic because, so there's a ground fire, which burns like underneath the pine cones and the twigs in the forest. There's a surface fire, which burns the underbrush, so above a ground fire, and burns the pine needles and twigs. Then there's a crown fire, which burns the canopies, and those are the most dangerous. So, yeah. Yes.
What's the most common type of fire?
I'm actually not sure about that, but I know that crown fires, you have to have a different fire to start a crown fire, because usually the fire leaks into the canopy of the trees after being probably like a surface fire. So, yeah. Any more questions? Okay.